Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Yeah, my microphone's way over there. I don't know why. I have a quick question. Are you the only one working on Criticality Score, or you got some folks there in Sydney with you doing stuff?
The answer is yes, but to both of those. So at the moment, I'm currently the only person, but we had someone join this week, last week, who will also be contributing to the package analysis project and Criticality Score. So
Cool.
yes, not for much longer.
All right, that's good. That's good.
And I'm interested in, like, part of the work that I'm trying to do is to make sure that it facilitates other people's use of it. So as well as productionizing it, there's an interest in making sure the documentation is like easy, makes it easy to use and clear to how you can actually run it yourself. So yeah.
We'll get to see how popular our new time is. Looks like we have a few people joining. That's good. I don't know how many people have all the calendar stuff popping up automatically, but looks like some people made it. All right, well, we're a few minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get started. Looks like we have more people joining. That's great. Welcome to the Securing Critical Projects bi-weekly working group meeting in our shiny new APAC friendly time that will be alternating on from here until daylight savings, which isn't the same everywhere. So we'll try to figure out how we do the transition from this time to the new time after daylight savings switches. That'll be fun. But yeah, so welcome. Thanks again for joining at this time. I just posted the meeting notes in the chat. If you don't have access, it's also in the calendar invite. Feel free to drop in there and add yourself as an attendee. Yeah, and then we'll move on to new faces. Is anybody here first time joining or hasn't been in a while and like to introduce yourself?
It's my first time. Oh, I guess I should. Hi. Forgot the camera. It's my first time. I am Catherine. I'm an open source evangelist at Intel. I've been dropping into a few of these meetings just to kind of get an idea of what the different working groups are working on. Yeah, so I'm here. I have some colleagues that I think attend these, and I'm interested in what's going on. And then at some point, I'd like to figure out how I might be able to contribute.
Excellent, welcome. Yeah,
Thank you.
So feel free to also take a look at our, the README page on our GitHub repo covers kind of like the top high level of the projects we're working on. That also reminds me, Mira and I did a quick update to the TAC on Tuesday. The TAC likes to get updates from the working groups on regular intervals now, so I'll find a link to that YouTube and a timestamp, and also post that in the chat as soon as I'm done talking. Anybody other new faces? Okay, great. So we will move on. And also, agenda looks a little light, so if anybody has any topics, don't hesitate to add those. And we'll move on to Caleb, who has an update on the Criticality Score project.
Hello, and I haven't been in a while, so I'm Caleb from Google. I've been working on Criticality Score, the project, and package analysis stuff. There's work going on with package analysis, but I'm not going to cover it at this time. I'll probably wait till the next sync that we have. In terms of Criticality Score, in June, I managed to get some of the new code. No, I got the new code that I wrote running and was able to score or collect signals for about 900,000 GitHub repos. I've put the link in there and for anybody to look at. I've yet to compare that to the previous all.csv that was posted to the project and to see what's changed or how it differs. But I intend to do that in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, feel free to take a look. I've done some like early analysis on it, and I'm basically intending to clear house on the signals that we use because most of them aren't particularly useful. In particular, a lot of them over-index on popularity and activity as opposed to actual, like, how many people depend on this, or is this actually secure or not? Oh, sorry, yeah, the security posture and things like that. So for example, and some of the data is just not very useful. So for example, org count or contributor count tends to follow forks, and so a bunch of Linux forks rank far too high. So things like that are interesting in terms of how they affect the data set. I also did some analysis on, because I've now got a big set of signals, I can do some statistical analysis and looking at the actual distribution versus is it actually Zipfian distribution? And turns out most of them are, but some of them aren't. So yeah, I'm hoping to kind of report this more formally as well. But out of that, there's also work going on productionizing the entire infrastructure. So it's kind of expensive to run this locally yourself. It took about 10 days to generate the data for 900,000 repositories. And that was with about 8 GitHub personal access tokens and me nursing the job the whole way. So that's not particularly easy for anybody to repeat. So the idea of productionizing it is that it is very easy for, well, no one has to do any work. It just starts producing signals. And if we're trying to improve signals, then it's really important to be able to rerun that job over and over again. And so being able to have this productionized makes it easy to start iterating on adding new signals and yeah, trying to improve the actual sources of data that we have in terms of how this works. The other part of productionizing it also means that the data is current and we're not waiting a year for someone to actually regenerate the data itself. So hopefully we can start to gain some momentum and interest around the data it's producing as well. So yeah, and hopefully like researchers and other people can start to use it for their own interest or extend it and add signals that they're interested in as well. So that is the state of the work. So I've got 2 links in here. One is to a pull request I just chucked up with the current state of the design doc that I'm working on. It refers to some score. It kind of is going to use a lot of the scorecard infrastructure pieces, but the document that I refer to isn't actually public. So I don't know exactly how I'll adjust the doc to kind of make that easy for people to follow. But basically, it's going to leverage a lot of the scorecard infrastructure to try and make it to get this up and running quickly. So that's basically it. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I know that some of this has been put up very recently, so yeah, I'm interested in any feedback. And if you don't have it now, please reach out to me on Slack or email, or whatever. I'm happy to chat at any time, as long as it's in APAC friendly time. Jux?
Yeah, I had one comment, I guess, which is that if you haven't already, try to make it a GitHub app, because they hand out a much more generous allowance of rate limits. I have also been scraping recently, and the 5,000 limit doesn't get you very far.
No, it doesn't. So I'm hoping to leverage the scorecard experience in running, and I think they have some, they already have app access. So it may be that I don't have to do anything, but I'll certainly keep that in mind. I may have to do something specifically for Criticality Score.
No, I believe the scorecard stuff uses PATS. But for reading, do you have to, for the GitHub app, you still have to have it installed on the packages you want to read, or the GitHub repositories, right? Do you,
I mean, it depends, you know, like the permissions system for GitHub, I might have done it differently, not knowing the technical constraints that were in play. But the main thing is that you get your I'm forgetting the magic word for OAuth, scope. You get your scopes, and then that scope is sort of like joined with what you can see in your account if you're logged in, and then that's what you can do. So if you take the repo permission and you're logged in, then you can see repos that you are able to see, that are private, that are visible to you, but not ones that are not. And of course, you can see any public repo and read it.
okay. Yeah, I'll have to look at the app, because like on the apps, actually, you know what I haven't done is apps can like ask people to, you know, authenticate, and like the app can act as a person, but I think also the app can just act as an app. And at that point, I think it only can look at the stuff that it's been installed on. But yeah, maybe there's another way to get higher quota for the publicly readable repos. So yeah, let's take a look at that.
We could also ask our friends who we know through NPM whether they can escalate this question, because I'm sure that there are under the table sweetheart deals for the right people.
I know that the scorecard people have tried to get an under the table sweetheart deal and have not been successful.
Not been successful.
That would be really good if there was.
So Microsoft will give us millions of dollars, but not more than 5,000 requests per hour. I mean, fair enough.
I think the other part of this is there's projects like GH Archive and GH Torrent, and they are potentially useful sources of gathering this data, but there are some questions I have around the reliability, and I don't necessarily want to be reading from a data source that then starts to have gaps or misses stuff. So that's partly why I've focused on reading from the origin as opposed to a mirror of the data. So in time that may change, and I'd like it to, but at this stage it's kind of as it is. Yeah. Thanks,
Awesome.
Chad.
Thanks for that. All right. Any other updates? Are you done, Caleb?
I was just gonna. I'll repeat what Jacques asked a cool question beforehand, which is, am I the only person working on this? There's a new starter in Sydney who will be working with me on both Criticality Score and package analysis. So hopefully some of the stuff here starts to accelerate as well. In terms, yeah. So I'm hoping that he can join at some point as well. These meetings, but yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, and I'm also, yeah, a whole lot of the way that the project is being built is to try and encourage or facilitate other people making use of this. So, yes.
Wonderful. And one thing I'll just throw in quickly, I do apologize for the background noise. But if you'd like to have a brainstorming session with the work group on signals or any way that we could brainstorm together to help your work, we can certainly do that at a future meeting.
Definitely, yes. And I'm also interested in people collecting papers and stuff where others have done research and figured out whether things are useful or not. For example, I read one recently that said popularity isn't a very good indicator of security. So things like that are useful. So any papers that may also give indication around what we should be collecting would be really helpful as well.
Absolutely.
Great. So I think we'll move on to our next topic. I'll go ahead and present the charter as well. Okay. So yeah, so feedback on the charter and questions on should we be voting on this. Thanks again to Jay for setting this up.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jay. And yeah, I think it says somewhere in the charter that we have to essentially formally vote on it as a working group. So maybe because this was our first alternate time session, maybe we didn't have as many folks as we normally do. We can at least do some basic discussion today, and then we could let everyone know that maybe at the next working group meeting, we'll take a maybe a formal vote or a semi-formal vote to essentially codify this, so to speak.
One thing, if this is following like the template design, one thing that stood out when we did this for securing software repos was that there's nothing in there that defines the initial contributors, I think it is. No, maintainers. I'm sorry. Maintainers are like the special class of folks. So we wound up adding a section at the bottom where we listed the initial maintainers to bootstrap it.
Yeah, it does say like the maintainers here will be documented in the repository. I was hoping that that would be essentially the people that were the leads from our project is my proposal there. Any thoughts on that?
I have no objection.
Oh, you're
Just bearing in mind that we should. Am I okay?
Back. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Are you saying that maintainers aren't defined?
The way it's defined, this is my recollection. It's been a little while since I read the boilerplate, but the way it was defined was that maintainers are quite powerful, or are essentially the final deciders in disputes. But there's nothing in it that defines who is a maintainer. It just says maintainers are the initial collaborators defined at the creation of the technical initiative.
Right. Yeah, that might be solved by just on the initial page there, giving them a title at the top saying, you know, whatever and maintainers, and then in the, I mean, I'm not sure that's my quick fix. That's a Band-Aid, shrugs. But if on the page, the page you were at before, Jeff, yeah, here, you got individuals here at the top here that they can leads or the contributors or underneath maintainers, right? You add that line in there, and then that makes that sentence make sense in the charter.
Yes.
Would that satisfy that, Jack?
I would have to read it again to be sure. I'll just try and track down the one we did for securing software repos so that you can see what I mean. Securing software repos, charter.
Because I almost want to say that in the whole hell, I'm going to check right now, because when I did this, I'll be honest, all I did was I pulled from one that's been adopted. So,
Mhm.
so I pulled for one that's been adopted, and then I looked up another one that's been adopted. They both look the same. I said, this is what we're riding with as a template.
Yeah, and it's if you see the securing software repos, we use the same boilerplate. All we did was we added a section.
We
of
add the
maintainers.
line down there at the bottom. Got it.
Yeah, and you know the charter can be amended
So here
by
goes
the
the
maintainers.
only,
So
here goes the only issue I have with that. That list might change, and it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot easier to change that on that README page than it is to remember to go into the charter and change it.
yes, I don't disagree. We could have a section that just says for the purposes of this document, the maintainers are the people listed in the README. You still need the maintainers to vote people into the maintainership or to vote them out.
Right. Well, and that's there, right? I mean, like you have that
Yes.
written there. I just feel like a charter should be something that you don't touch unless
I see
absolutely
the argument.
necessary.
Yeah, I buy that. I got no objections to that approach.
Yes, I'm in total agreement too. I would want to really be thorough before, formalizing this, because I think changing it will be kind of a hassle. So not that it shouldn't be ever changed ever, but I'm in agreement that we should really make sure this sounds good and review it pretty thoroughly before codifying it, so to speak.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with you, Jay. Like, I like that the charter will be essentially saying the maintainers are documented, but we do need to have that documented. And I would propose just doing it on the README, where we do say that the maintainers of this working group are the people that are the leads of any of the SIGs projects.
Yeah,
or
that can
just
either
leave
be,
them out.
you can just add a line right under the contributors. Just add a line that says maintainers, and then boom, add those names right in there, and then that can be changed whenever that changes, right?
Yeah,
If there's ever
I
a
agree.
change, if anybody leaves wherever, that can be changed. Easier than remembering to change this.
I mean, it's easy for me to remember because I have a background in student politics, and I'm always like reading the fine print.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot in here that's like the maintainers will determine the process for selecting future maintainers. Like we don't have that determined yet, right? But yeah, I think it's okay to adopt the charter even if all these processes aren't
It's
so determined.
It's fairly lightweight for what it is.
Are you all familiar with that section that talks about electing a chair? I'm not too familiar with this kind of this space. So yeah, there it is.
So the way I saw it when we talked about this in securing software repos, the way we saw it is that the TSC is essentially dead letter until there's a dispute.
Mhm.
So it's not the working group. It's a different body that is formed out of the maintainers who attend or who are involved with the working group. And I see it as not necessary to spin it up unless you have a dispute that requires a vote. And there's always the backstop that even if that doesn't settle matters, you can fall back to the TAC to make the decision and settle matters. If we need to spin up the TSC, elect a chair, take a vote, then it's probably a unhealthy situation anyway. But mostly electing a chair just comes down to you put the meeting together, you call for candidates, you call for votes, and then whoever has the most votes is the chair. And then they act like a chair from there. The one thing that I took out when I did this, and I lodged a bug in the templates repo, which is you can see that on 2D, there's a little snippet of text which sort of like came riding shotgun, the TSC chair, or any other TSC members so designated, blah, 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 serves as the technical initiatives voting representative on the technical advisory council. There's no such thing. The TAC doesn't accept outside voting members. It is its own thing. So that snippet of text is a
I thought
vestigial
that was
from some of
weird
the
as
project.
well. I'm not gonna lie. I thought that was weird as well, but it's on everybody else's charter.
Well, it's not on the securing software repos. We took it out and I lodged the bug report because it doesn't fit with the TAC charter.
All right. Yeah. So other than that one, it's on every.
Other than that one,
Yeah,
apart from us. Yeah.
It's on everyone else's
I guess
charter.
it
I
can
thought
just
that was
be
weird as well.
if the TAC does decide to request a vote from the from the working
Yeah.
groups, this
Yeah.
Go ahead and take that out. Let's see. I'll take that out now.
So, I mean, I might be getting ahead of myself, but what do we, what do we think of the essentially the, we're supposed to define like who's a maintainer, who's a contributor, who's a collaborator. What would we think of the people under leads being maintainers, people under contributors being either contributor or collaborator? And like in the idea also that like if we want to essentially accept a new project to the working group, the lead on that project would be a maintainer. Does that seem right, or does that seem like it should be somebody that's more or that that's not a new, like say a new project coming in?
It makes sense off of initial kind of gut reaction. But again, I'm not too well versed in the nitty-gritty when it comes to governance and voting and all that stuff. So I would definitely lean on the working group members to help out with that.
I think the question of project adoption is one also that the TAC have been wrestling with in developing sort of updated governance for the TAC down.
So yeah, because there's going to be like incubating, and then there's going to be different levels of projects. So maybe it's once it reaches a certain level, then the lead would be a maintainer, maybe. Okay, I'll take a look at I'll propose some text for next meeting for like who would be defining some of the things that this says will be defined, like who's a maintainer, how do we add maintainers, and and then who's a collaborator or whatever.
Yeah.
And then that we can put that in the README, because that won't be part of the charter, but I think the charter looks good.
Just made that change as well. I took out that line about the TAC. Just have to refresh the page there. I just did it just now.
Very cool. But yeah, I think, but again, initial reaction is the way that those definitions are, the way you suggested, Jeff, makes sense with collaborators being, anyone in the work group who shows up, who participates, and then the contributors can be the leads of the kind of the individual, the collaborators, could be the leads as kind of like the representatives responsible for those efforts.
Awesome. So yeah, like you said, Amir, let's wait until next meeting to do a vote.
Gonna update the notes to reflect that right now.
Awesome, thank you. Next agenda item we had was ingestion form. Oops.
Yeah, I'd love to hear
Any-
from anyone in the work group if they had a chance to review it, if they had thoughts, any feedback or discussion around that.
I am still getting the access firewall, I'm afraid. Still getting the you need access.
Darn, I'm so sorry. Okay, let me try again.
Google says no.
Okay, then maybe till I get that sorted out, we can move on to something else if someone has another topic.
Do you want to present it or?
Let me see if I can actually. Yeah. Ooh. Okay. Can everyone see the screen? Am I on mute still?
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Oh, okay. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so just to provide a little bit of context, so the objective of this form is really just to capture feedback from OpenSSF and the greater open source community on helping provide some direction as to which projects we should be considering. It's not the best name, but for the timing, it's called the Ingestion Form for securing critical projects. It currently has just a couple of very basic questions. So first one being pretty straightforward, what project or projects do you nominate as critical? This is currently short answer, so I guess I can't make edits right now. Oh, I'm just editing questions. Okay, yeah, so this would just be a short answer question. And then taking in some feedback that we got at the last session, trying really hard to make the answers in a way that we can automate this a little bit easier or reduce the risk of error or inconsistencies. So first follow-up question is a metadata or package link in which I think we should put a recommended format so that we can give an example of what we want it to look like. And then the next question being a pretty simple, why question. What criteria is that based on? This is also, I think, I'm working on maybe having a couple of pretty common answers that we can use, but then also giving folks open ability to specify, because we won't be able to capture everything, I don't think, and as drop down or as designated answers. And then lastly, just again for automation or for simplification, just like a link to a project page. So if you have, I don't know exactly if we can make buttons where, if you choose GitHub, then you get to put in, a GitHub link or, what have you. But as you can see, it's very simple so far, and going back to kind of what our objective is for even doing this, I always defer back to our documentation of really what our objective is, which is just to provide a best effort analysis of research to generate a curated set of projects. So with that, I'm going to try and mute myself because I'm guessing the background noise is unbearable for you all, and I do apologize for that. But I'd love to hear any initial feedback, any thoughts, anything that people have, be greatly appreciated. So thank you, and love to hear some feedback.
The background noise is not too bad for what it's worth. The suppression is doing a good job.
Oh, well, thank you. Good to know.
I was curious about the GitHub link, GitLab link type thing. Is there a reason we wouldn't just have a text field and just ask them to paste the link to the source or the page?
Yeah, that probably makes sense. I was just wondering for kind of automation purposes, or if this is going to feed into like a larger list or some kind of a feed. But yeah, I think I might have just been overthinking this one, and it could just be as simple as, please provide the link to the project, and maybe we could put examples so that people do it in a specific format. Does that make sense?
I guess you can't see us. Yes.
Oh, right. Okay.
I'm thumbs upping and feeling like you're not seeing me as I see it.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. That's
Caleb is next.
Okay. Yes, Caleb.
So a couple of, I think, first of all, I'll follow on with that. I think having a link to the source repository and any other alternative links as well may be useful, because sometimes the canonical source repository can be a bit confusing because they'll have a mirror on GitHub or something else. Also, actually, the main point I had, which is the criteria may not want to be one option, pick out of a list. It might be, I'm basing this on more than one option. So there may be a reason why they choose to have, it's based on criticality score and some other criteria that they've decided based on. Yeah.
That's a good point. So maybe having multiple answers.
Yeah, I'm not. So yeah, because if I came to that, I'd be like, well, the criticality score ranked it reasonably high, but not so high. But then I know some other information that pushes it up to the level of something that I care about or should care about. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense, and I think you're absolutely right. And if you remember how we did it last time too, we did as I think a relatively easier way to bump up projects is if there are multiple selection criteria that can justify why a project should be on there. So that's good to know. I'll be sure to have something like please select all the answers that fit, something like that.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the feedback.
Munawari, have your hand up?
Yeah, hey, so I had a quick question about this. So are we expecting that whoever is using this form to input a data, they're also providing the input to justify their input, as in do they have to actually provide the criticality score? Or let's say you have GitHub fork, do they have to give you the quantitative number? So are we also attaching a text input with each of these, or this is just or somebody just selects let's say a couple of these and that's that? As in, is the onus on the guy who's making the input to also justify with quantitative data or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think generally we want to make this as easy as possible. So the more we're asking people to do, the more likely we are to lose them. But I do think it's important to have, some type of justification or selection criteria. So maybe not requiring them to, write an essay as to why this was selected, but having at least some reasoning for why a project is selected, I think is going to be very important, because, the first thing people are going to ask when or see when they see that something like this is, well, why this, why that, why was this project chosen, why was that project chosen? So I think having at least something to attribute to the why, even if it's just it has a high criticality score, it was identified in this research paper, and it's one of the top by download count in this platform. So we have these reasoning so that we can say, so we're not just, pulling stuff out of our hats, we're actually providing some type of selection criteria.
Sure. And pardon my naivete, but I'm also curious about what is the intent of using this form? So because I see the list of projects in the CSV forms that has already been created. Caleb was sharing that, and I mean, so for example, for Python, it has like 130,000. Do we expect somebody to suddenly break into like top 100? I mean, that's very unlikely. So why? What is the use of this one going to be? Because there's an automated process that already has scraped the data and has probably created a long list of things that's already there. So yeah, I'm just curious. Again, it might be something that has been discussed before, but
sure, yeah. I'd love to share at least kind of what the initial thought process was. So if you see on my screen here, this was kind of our first iteration of this exercise, basically. And we kind of had multiple kind of layers, right? So first we had what were called candidate projects. So the idea being that, we could take, from the community at large, ingest these nominations to have kind of an initial, we'll call it a set, and then to be able to kind of chop away at it using kind of further analysis, which what we did here was when we had candidate projects, we actually, if it was warranted, discussed with the work group to, either give it a yes, to either give it a no, and to essentially to do that curation step to get to kind of a final list, or I should stop saying the word list, to set on a final set of projects that, have gone through this kind of filtering or this kind of curation, because that I think is the value that we are trying to provide is, we're not just one, because you're absolutely right. There have been many other efforts. I mean, one that comes to mind is like Harvard Census 2 and many other different research. I'm trying to answer this question, what are projects out there that are critical? So I think having a community-driven curation is what's gonna really provide the value, because automation and lists and what have you are great, but they're always going to be imperfect. So I think doing a little bit of both, where we have this quantitative process or quantitative reasoning, but then this qualitative kind of community-driven curation to help kind of shine the light on which projects to focus on is the intention. So I'd love to hear your initial thoughts on if you think we're on the right track to do that, or if there are other things we should be considering, because at the end of the day, yeah, we just want to do what's best for the open source community and open source ecosystem. So that's why another reason we're going through this process of getting a lot of feedback and trying to make it as complete as we can be before it starts kind of being used on a bigger scale.
Yeah, so we actually consume the data like that. Like for example, the Excel sheet that was shared. I mean, I just emailed it to my group, and then basically I was telling them to use the data. So you are aware, but I mean, just for everyone else, we have this project that we're working on of scanning the PyPI project, Python projects that are in the PyPI repository to understand or to detect vulnerabilities. So I'm basically the CEO of an application security company. We're building a better bug detection tool and so on. So we have this website, pypi.openrefactory.com, where we are working with Alpha Omega, like Michael Scopetta and others, to scan the PyPI projects and list the vulnerabilities that are being identified, and with very high precision triaging, so that whatever is listed there is useful. And one way that I found it very interesting, especially the CSV list that was shared in the document that I think Caleb was pointing to, is that we can just identify our we can have that list on the background. We can just say, let's run on projects 1 to 100 and 201 to 250 or whatever. And then our tool or our thing that is running or driving the website, it can automatically do that scan and generate the results. So that gives us a good way of like having a long list of stuff, and then we can pick and choose our targets. I do had one question also regarding to that, as in how often have you seen that the ranks or these lists change? I'm just curious as an academic interest, like from time to time, do you see like things break into, things get out, and like does it happen at the top level? Does it really happen at the other end where we don't necessarily care? It's just something that's of academic interest. With somebody who might be.
It's a great question. I'd love to hear if anyone has any thoughts.
I mean, to answer the last question, I mean, we've only done this exercise once, so it hasn't changed.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're looking at like, you know, the hundreds of packages, not in the thousands that we want to automate like things with, but like in the hundreds where we're trying to do things that can be useful at like at a manual level. I hope that kind of covers it. But we have a few
I
hands
also
up.
think that we've
Does anybody-
discussed it before that we're not going to
Yeah.
use rankings. That's why we're calling it
Yeah.
a set instead of
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a few hands up. Is anybody responding to Munawar, or do they have another topic to discuss?
I was going to respond to Minowa, but I
Okay.
think Randall's had his hand up for a while. Randall, is it okay if I just quickly make a comment and then bounce out?
absolutely.
Cool. So at the risk of self-promotion, something I'm slightly notorious for, I'm going to point to a talk I did at the last open source summit. And there's a YouTube link there. And a lot of the things we're asking are sort of issues we grapple with. And I had a particular subset of the approach, which was talking about, you know, expert opinions about things, in addition to data-driven approaches like the criticality score, because my view is that we'll probably wind up needing both in the long run. But a lot of the issues you discuss, like, for example, what order do you assess things? There's a bit of a turtles all the way down problem, which is if you knew how to assess things, then you wouldn't need experts to give opinions. So there's sort of a circularity there. So I think hopefully some of that talk will help.
I've actually seen that talk. It's a great talk, by the way. I've seen that.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well, good. I've saved some time. Randall, thank you. Thanks for waiting. It's all yours.
No problem. I've also seen the talk and it's pretty good. But I was going to say, so Amir and I had talked about turning this into a GitHub repo in the past. And I did do some work on that this weekend, and I found out that Criticality Score had changed from originally how I thought it would, or we could set it up. But I did notice that there's a lot of similarities between what's going on now and the former Python tool as to what we're trying to do here as well. So I just wanted to point that out. So, yeah.
Yeah, and if I could jump in real quick, one reason I could see GitHub working is because even with our first iteration of this, I'm going to share my screen again here. This is the work group's repo. And when we did our first iteration, a decent amount of folks submitted opened issues saying, hey, have you considered this project? Have you considered that project? So that's one of the reasons I think I could see GitHub being a useful tool, because, you know, it's a public place where people can see all of this. So, you know, if in theory someone were to say, you know, consider adding these projects and this is the reasoning, we'll be able to really trace all of that, I think, in a very effective way, where we can see how this set grows and evolves. And to go back to Munawara's question, I do think over time this list will change, and that's part of or this set will change, and that's part of the reason of, I think, if it's a process that is a living, curated thing that can adjust with the times, so to speak, because yes, lots of times there are emerging technologies, emerging projects that come out that would very much fly under the radar for if you were to look at its, let's say, its criticality score or a lot of these other different things out there. So so having a curated kind of living thing that the community drives is where I could really see the value of it coming, because I think it will change over time. And being able to consider, you know, emerging technologies, maybe things that fly under the radar. You know, part of this whole, you know, we use that graphic a lot, you know, the Libraska, but you know, this could very well be a way to help identify those projects that are just, you know, one solo maintainer, or even are even not maintained anymore, hardly maintained. You know, I think it's really important that we have some kind of a mechanism that can shine light on these different types of situations in open source. So, so based on all of that, sorry, I know that was quite long-winded, Randall, does this kind of fit into what you've been working on in terms of like, you know, using GitHub as a way to curate this and to kind of track all the things that go on?
Absolutely. Now, let me say this. So Criticality Score kind of is building, and Caleb can correct me towards if I'm wrong, but they're building towards like maintaining a list of packages that then you can run the scan over on. So, or anyone can correct me if I'm wrong. So it is very similar in that regard. What I've chosen to do right now, just to like have like a dummy test, is I'm using NPM. So it's actually quite easy to pull out specs out of NPM. So if we did want to have the tool kind of completely not like with no like hard score, if that makes sense, but there's more like, hey, this down or this package got X amount of downloads and was last updated this date, like stuff like that. We can also do that for this list. So therefore there's not like an actual or any type of competitive score, if that makes sense, or that can, I don't know if I'm making sense, but yeah.
So let me just clarify, you're scanning NPM, the package artifact repository, as opposed to GitHub, which is what the Criticality Score is doing.
Correct.
Yeah.
And,
okay.
and right now, we just tried pulling things like the amount of times the package was downloaded, last time it was updated, and a few other things. I'm not the NPM API. It's a guy that we know, John. I don't know if you guys know John Neal, but he's been helping out with the NPM side of things. But yeah, we're just pulling out basically basic information that NPM has available just to put that up, because John thinks that it's a really terrible idea if we're going to make this like non-competitive to start attaching hard scores. So if this is about like just having an opinion of whether or not something is critical, then that shouldn't necessarily go attached to a hard score. Furthermore, let me also say this, Caleb, in other calls that we've had, there have been concerns about, well, what about if I'm not on GitHub? So yes. So
first of all, like, it sounds like some of the work you're doing is similar to like deps.dev and the open source insights team at Google. They are scanning like NPM and Pipey and a bunch of other repositories to collect data. I don't think they collect data specifically for generating a criticality score, but the criticality score project that I'm working on does use it as a data source. They have a BigQuery data set you may be interested in and find it easier to query than NPM directly. You can, yeah. In terms of like GitHub as well as a data source, I'm very interested in not being just GitHub centric. It's just that GitHub is a big, one, it has a lot of the data already, and two, its APIs are fairly straightforward to query against. In the future, so I have an enumeration tool that enumerates GitHub, but I'm interested in like how can we expand that to other.
Well, I know I took a look at GitLab, and I know GitLab is similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so I'm actually I think my next enumerator is actually going to enumerate the deps.dev open source insights dataset in BigQuery and like spit out all of the URLs for the repos it knows about.
Right.
So a lot of the GitLab and GitHub ones, because GitLab doesn't actually have something like GitHub search for querying that. No. So I'd love to expand it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know that we've had previous calls that has come up about this list, about how would we handle non-GitHub related things. So yeah, But as I said, I know
Yeah.
that this list is very focused on not necessarily turning this into a competition, because that was one of my things, because I do work in a pretty big JS project. It's one of my many day jobs. And I know how some people can get real competitive in JS.
I'm very keen. Like, in fact, if you're generating data that's useful, it may be something that we end up choosing to source for the Criticality Score project as well. So I think it's like 1,000 flowers bloom, whatever it is. Like,
Right.
It's also helpful to have some competition in the space because people have different ideas and different
Well, I'm
approaches.
trying to replicate or get the data out of Amir's initial list. Like, when was the package last up? And I think that you got, and that Criticality Score does pull some of this information too.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what I'm trying to replicate as of right now. It's just the original list, but in somewhat like automated form. So therefore, like, we have the information; it can be inputted as such. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm certainly interested in the approaching this from the artifact side of things as opposed to the source repository side of things. So yeah, very interested in how that.
I could definitely keep you in touch and kind of communicate with you on what we're doing and how we're handling it. But yeah, we finally got started on that. And initially we were thinking of just running like the command line version of Criticality Score, but we realized quickly that doesn't really work anymore.
The Go projects do work. Running them regularly. So if you need help on those, please let me know. Yeah, the Python version is not as I need to stick a deprecated logo up on it.
Yeah, I saw that, and then I think it was Naveed that told me that Python is deprecated. So
yeah, I'll try and update that README over the next week just to make it clearer.
Appreciate it. So, but yeah, that's the update on the GitHub repo.
Yeah, my question is, should we have, for more collaboration on this automation, should we create an OpenSSF repo that we can all?
Yeah, I can transfer ownership to OpenSSF if you like.
I don't know.
It's very primitive. Let me say this.
Yeah.
I was gonna wait until it's a little bit like I had like a full demo, which I think I was supposed to have this at next time, but I've been really scatterbrained as of the last week. But I do have, like, I am working it. I'm working with it on Peter, who was in last meeting. He was here.
Yeah.
So but yeah, definitely. And that's why me and Peter work at Astro. So that's why it's easy for us to work on it together. But yeah, we can definitely transfer it to OpenSSF at any time.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we're out of time. Any last things before we go? I don't see anything else on the agenda. Nope. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks for joining at the new time, and hope to see you all in Slack or on GitHub issues or at the next meeting.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jeff. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Ev.
Yes.